There are a lot of myths surrounding sexual abuse. Some of them just kind of annoying, irritating. Some of them can actually be pretty dangerous, really kind of for some different reasons. And today I want to talk about one that is both really frustrating and dangerous in more ways than one. Welcome. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thank you for joining me. I've talked before about some different myths, and today I wanted to talk about this in particular because it is Pride Month, and I think it is at this particular time. I mean, certainly in history, there's been other times that have been really important, but given where we are, not just in the US, but particularly in the US, I think it's really, really important to talk about just acknowledging the importance of human rights and equality and the dangers of lies and myths and misinformation. And I'm going to share a little bit of my own personal experience with this that I don't think I've ever talked about before. Um, so, as you've probably heard many times throughout your life, and if not, if you've followed anything related to things that are happening in the US, particularly around some degree with homophobia, but particularly when it comes to people who are trans. There is this lie that is being told. And I'm saying lie because there is there's evidence, there are statistics that show that it is not accurate at all. But there are people who continue to lie about either gay people or in particular trans people being dangerous to your children, particularly in some sort of sexual abusive type of way. And this is a myth that goes way back, not just for trans people, but I think even more so specifically, there was a lot of talk early on in my life that there was this idea that it was gay men who abused children. And I have shared before, and I don't remember really the context of what the video was, but I know that I have shared before that I've had male clients who have shared with me their fears around becoming an abuser, not because I had any inclination toward it whatsoever, but just because of the myths and lies that are out there, this idea that that it's going to cause you to abuse somebody. This has been going on for quite a long time, unfortunately, and it's really not getting any better. But more kind of out there, I guess, something that's being talked about more and more is related to trans people and the danger that they pose. And if you've followed anything at all, or even just seen some headlines, this is going back probably to maybe even 9 years ago or so, but certainly within that time, talking about the dangers of having trans people read to your school-age children, children that are like in pre-K or kindergarten. It's just so ridiculous to me. I really have difficulty trying to talk about that in a serious way because it's just so ridiculous. In part because of the reality of what children, the dangers that our children are experiencing. And then because it's been made political, so much discussion about trans people in sports and trans people in bathrooms and mutilating our children. In fact, just this morning, I was already thinking about doing something about pride, but then just this morning, I saw somebody shared with me a post from, and it's a verified account, the FBI of the United States of America. And I don't remember, it was a fairly short post, and I don't really remember how it started, but it said, if you care about children and you want to stop the mutilation of our children from gender affirming care. So basically, I think they're asking for people to, I don't know, report people. I'm not quite sure, but it specifically said mutilating our children for gender affirming care. And it just, honestly, it infuriates me, first of all, to think about a branch, such an important branch of the United States government, saying something so incredibly stupid. But it just is another example of how ignorant people are. And ignorance is a lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, right? But also how that ignorance has the potential to create so much damage. So part of what I wanted to talk about is the reality. So in these conversations, most recently around trans people and the dangers that they pose, that whether they're going to turn your kid trans or abuse your kid or whatever the case they're trying to make is, I think it's just really important to recognize the reality. And it's hard to have an exact number because most people don't report, period. So it is challenging to know what the real numbers are. But it's interesting when I actually just looked this up again recently because things can change. Early on in my career, when I talked about how most people knew their abuser and had a relationship with them, to some degree, it was like 80 to 85%. And now there's statistics that are showing up to 90%. So that's kind of an interesting shift there. So the reality is that when it comes to sexual abuse of children of any age, a child of any age, between 80 to 90% of the abusers are people who are trusted by that child, and often the family, most often the family. 80 to 90% of children who are abused, so as a whole, 80 to 90% of children who are abused know and trust, and unfortunately often love their perpetrator. That is the reality. So I actually don't know what the percentage of trans people is in the world, but I know it's very small. I think I could be totally wrong about this, but I feel like I recently heard 1% of the population. But I don't know, even if it's 10%, you think all of those people are going to go around abusing children? 80 to 90% of people who are abusing children are known and trusted by the child and most often the family, and is often, most often, loved by that child, or will be, depending on how old that child is, will be loved by that child. So not everybody has a trans person in their family. Most people don't even have a trans person in their orbit, at least not that they're aware of. But the reality is they don't. So this idea that trans people are going into bathrooms or classrooms to have access to children to abuse is a lie. It is a lie. Trans people going into a public bathroom are likely concerned about being able to come out without anything bad happening to them in that bathroom. Trans people are trying to get through their day without anything bad happening to them. And this isn't just about trans people. The problem, or there are many problems with this, but one of the most significant problems in terms of why I think it specifically relates to my channel and the things that I talk about is that there are people who are trying to scapegoat a group of people, gay and or trans, among many other ways or types of people that are being scapegoated for a myriad of other things. But people are being scapegoated for a horrible crime that 80 to 90% of the time it's somebody known and trusted by the child. By far, by leaps and bounds, the majority of those abusers identify as straight. By far, they identify as straight. And another thing, so when we're talking about the danger to our children, the danger is not from gay or from trans people. The danger to our children are the people around us, the people in our communities, the people who are leaders in the churches. You can do a quick search on people that have been arrested for child abuse, particularly sexual abuse, child pornography, and look who those people are. A lot of them have a strong religious faith church affiliation. And I've been thinking about doing a whole other video even before I thought about doing this one, related a little bit to that I know is probably going to be very controversial, but I do think it's important. The danger is with people that we tell ourselves would never do anything. And when we put our effort and energy into protecting children from something that isn't a real threat, we are missing the cues, the signs, the symptoms that are very real over here. Now, I want to be clear. Most people, most straight people, most straight men are not abusers. So that 80 to 90% is not 80 to 90% of men, right? So I want to be clear about that. Children are not in danger of everybody they come in contact of being abused by. Statistically, the majority of people that your children come in contact with would never abuse them. However, the reality is that it happens. And I don't want to scare people, but we cannot pretend that we can identify a group of people. If there was one group of people that we could identify to keep our children away from, it would be people affiliated with the church in positions of leadership. That is the reality. If we're going to look at one group of people, or at this point, we could even look at those people, I guess they would be technically mostly affiliated with some sort of church or religion, but at this point, even looking at people who are more on the right-leaning side versus left-leaning side. Not that they don't exist on the left-leaning side, because they absolutely do. But when you look at arrests, there are more people over here. And it just happens to be that more people over here tend to lean more religious. I'm certainly not suggesting that anybody who's religious is a threat to children. And I do want to be clear about that. But I can tell you from my experience doing this work, and I can't tell you how many people that I have actually had conversations with, or people that have shared their stories with me. And I have had, unfortunately, many that I have actually worked with, where kind of like there's no comparison in abuse, but where people tend to have a lot of abusers, where it tends to be very physically harming. There's a lot of association with religion. And again, there's a lot more probably that I could say about that and kind of talk through a little bit, but it just is so infuriating to me, in part because when people come forward and they say, my brother did this, or my dad did this, or the pastor or the priest did this, sometimes even that child's own parent immediately will dismiss it. That can't possibly be true. And either they're such a great supporter of, the family or the community or whatever, or they're such a servant to God. They could never do something like that. And yet we have a whole, basically half of this country right now, who want to make gay and trans people the problem. The only problem that they have is trying to survive, is trying to get through their day, trying to figure out how to tell their family to hopefully not be cut off from them. They are not the problem. And it puts our children more at risk by trying to believe that they are, because we're missing all this other stuff over here. Not to mention the risk that it creates to those people, not only externally because of the violence that is perpetrated against them, but internally. And I know that there are a lot of people who watch my videos who fall into those categories. The entire LGBTQIA+ community. A significant risk in continuously hearing that and being afraid for your safety and well-being, feeling shunned for things that are not even true. The risk that that does to your mental well-being. There's a reason why self-harm, in particular suicidality, is so high among the population, those populations. And we have to recognize the real threat. And in recognizing that real threat, it allows us then to have more meaningful conversations not just with children, but in our families and in our communities, which will decrease the number of people who feel comfortable and confident in being able to get away with it. So, yeah, it comes back in part to conversations that are based in reality, not myth, not lies to suit an agenda, not instilling fear that has no place. And I know that if you're still watching this video, I'm kind of preaching to the choir a little bit here. But if there's anybody who has somehow kind of bought into it, which is not hard to do, because if you don't know that much about it, again, ignorance isn't in and of itself a bad thing. It's not a character flaw specifically. We're all ignorant about a variety of things, including myself. But when we recognize that there's other information, better, more realistic, factual information, then we can learn something from that. Just as, while it's still not where we would like it to be, it used to be believed, so many people have believed this, and unfortunately still do, that if you're abused by the same-sex perpetrator, then it either makes you gay or you must have already been gay. Otherwise, they wouldn't have chosen you. That is a lie, and it's based on ignorance. But it has been believed, it's a lie that has been passed down because people do not have conversations, real factual conversations about it. And the damage that that does to somebody who has been abused by a same-sex abuser, whether that survivor is gay or not, either way, the damage that it creates is incredibly significant. And we have to recognize, just like we've all been taught, right, that it's not some really scary looking man that is likely going to be somebody who tries to snatch you up off the street. While that is still out there, and that is unfortunately a reality, again, only maybe 10-15% of children who are sexually abused are abused by a stranger. We need to be able to recognize the reality of who these abusers are. And not only to have more awareness and protect our children, but to be able to have conversations so that children hear. And we don't have to give them the actual reality, like be afraid of your dad or something like that. We don't need to talk about that. But when we can have real conversations and age-appropriate conversations, the shame around it, the secrecy around it lessens, which gives us more freedom to have conversations, which gives us more freedom to be able to come forward. Like if you think about even abuse within the church specifically, I mean, that's gone on forever, right? But not until some people started coming forward did more people recognize that it was okay to do so, that they were not alone. And the more we make these conversations not something to be hidden, the more freedom we all get to experience. And the more accountable we can hold perpetrators. So whether it's about Pride Month and human rights for everybody and equality for everybody and equity for everybody and love is love no matter what, or we're talking about Child Abuse Prevention Month or Sexual Assault Awareness Month, or it's just a regular everyday day. We have to be mindful of the messages that we take in. And I do want to just say again, this video is not about trying to scare people. I think anybody watching this is likely already very aware and probably somewhat hypervigilant. It's to bring awareness to what is real and where the reality that the danger is not in what all of these people want us to believe. Your children are much safer in a bathroom, in a public bathroom with a trans person, no matter their age, than they are out in the world. Your children are much safer in a public bathroom with 3 trans people and a gay person. Let's add them in there. Much safer than they are out in the world. So if you are somebody who is a member of the community, we celebrate you. I celebrate you and your right to exist, your right to feel free, and your right to be who you are without apology. And know that you're not alone in this fight. Thank you for being here. I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, what came up for you in the comments. Thanks for being here. I look forward to seeing you next time.